Hey guys, welcome back to Justin Reads Romance. I'm Justin, and today I'm going to be doing my second weekly wrap-up for the month of January, and yeah, I have quite a few books to talk about and some that I can't talk about, which is, yeah, you'll get it whenever we get there. So anyway, last week I ended off my weekly wrap-up with Bound by Honor by Cora Riley because Jen introduced me to this mafia romance, and I only read book one as of last week. Then I started delving into it. So my first book that I'm wrapping up is Bound by Duty by Cora Riley. It's the second book in the Born in Blood series. I always want to say Bound in Blood just because all the books are bound by something. This book is about Dante and Valentina, and Dante is like the heir to the Chicago outfit. So in this series, we focus on the New York Familia and the Chicago outfit. The heroine from book one was originally from the Chicago outfit, and her arranged marriage was like a way for both of those mafia groups to make peace and form an alliance so that they can work together against the Russians who are taking over territory and just becoming a big nuisance. So Dante is a widower and Valentina is a widow, and she's actually considered like too old. She's like not even old. She's in her 20s, and she has not had any kids. So Dante's father is not super happy about his selection with Valentina, but the thing is, Dante was really in love with his wife. I wasn't really expecting that. He was like truly in love with his wife. They were married for like over a decade, and she died of cancer. And so he's still struggling with that, still struggling to come to terms with losing his wife. Valentina is an interesting character. We meet her in the first book, and so we learned that she is actually still a virgin because she's covering up that her first husband, she was friends with him. They were like best friends and they got married, but he was gay. And so he was covering up that he was gay, and she never slept with her husband. So she's kind of excited by this prospect of being married to Dante because now she can actually experience her own marriage, and she's hoping that she's going to be pleased in the marriage bed. The only problem is Dante does not touch her on the first night, and so she's like back to square one. She's like, oh, so another marriage where a guy just won't touch me. So I feel for Valentina because she just feels so undesirable, and she's trying to be a good wife, and it's so hard because Dante's just not talking to her. She feels unwelcome in her home. There's this cook who she's kind of like, I would consider like her like a housemaid. She kind of like considers it her domain, and she really liked Dante's first wife, and so she's like not vibing with Valentina. But like my heart really went out to her, and I really felt for Dante as well because I can understand his struggle, not wanting to move on with somebody else, not wanting to have feelings for somebody other than his first wife. So I thought that their story was really good. I actually really liked it. I would give it 4.5 stars, but I'm going to round it up to 5 stars on Goodreads. So I did not buy Bound by Hatred because I didn't really like Gianna much, what we saw of her from book one, Bound by Honor. Gianna is the younger sister of Arya, the heroine of book one, and she just is very mouthy, and I thought that she was just overly dramatic and one of those heroines who like to do the opposite of what she was told to do just to say that she could. So I just read Bound by Hatred on KU, and guess what? I ended up by really loving it. Gianna kind of really grew on me. I have to remember that these characters are pretty young, and so I expect them to act in a little childish manner. I think what really helped is that we have Matteo's point of view, and we see how he views Gianna right whenever he meets her. And Matteo's the less serious brother, the Vitiello brother, and oh my god, I love Matteo. He definitely made the book for me. Gianna definitely made things hard on herself, but I also really loved all their sexual tension. It was very unlike Arya and Luca's marriage because Arya was just so timid about the marriage bed, and it was just like, oh, it was just like a chore, and she just felt so meek and just not, and then Gianna is not like that at all. She might hate Matteo, but she's really curious about being with him, and so that really helps a lot. And I ended up by really loving their story. Even though she frustrated me a bit, I really did love their story, and I am going to get a paperback of that one because I was wrong, and I ended up by liking her. So I gave that one 4.5 stars. It's going to be rounded up to 5 on Goodreads. And then the last Scuderi girl, the sister. Liliana is the younger sister, and the romance between Liliana and Romero is very much prominent from book 1, but it's a child crush because is she 14 or 13 when she first meets Romero? And you could see like she's very flirty, and Romero's this bodyguard, and so he's not paying her any attention, knows that, oh, this just childhood crush. Once Liliana becomes of age, she's hanging out with her 2 sisters who are happily married in New York, and she's the only sister left with her father and her younger brother. And her younger brother is sort of starting to be inducted. He's about to become a made man. Her mother is sick and her father really doesn't care. So Liliana and Fabiano, Fabiano is the younger brother, they're just kind of like stuck in this house. Their father's never home anymore since their mother's diagnosis. The mother doesn't want Liliana to tell Arya and Gianna about her illness because it embarrasses their father. So this is like the heavy weight that Liliana is carrying around, and it's just so sad. She has so much responsibility and she's so alone now. So whenever she does get a chance to go visit with her sisters Arya and Gianna, she gets to see Romero, and she's definitely the pursuer of Romero, and they fall into this forbidden romance because Romero knows that he can never have Liliana. She comes from a very prominent family in the Chicago outfit, and he's only a bodyguard. He's not high enough to warrant marrying that high up, and so he just knows it's never going to work, but they are totally falling for each other. And he is watching Liliana as she feels more and more isolated, and she feels like she's the only caretaker of her mother. And their romance is so sweet. It's so angsty. I hate their father so much. He's such an asshole, and I just love this book. So this one, 4.5 stars again. I really loved it. And then I'm actually currently reading Bound by Vengeance, so I'll give you an update next week on what I think about that one. Then I re-listened to Magic Triumphs on audio. I wanted a refresher for the Kate Daniels world. I wanted to read the last book in the series before Blood Heir came out, so I listened to that on audio the Monday before the release of Blood Heir, and it's just so amazing. And it was so nice experiencing it in audio as well. I discovered that I've been pronouncing names wrong like a long time. Curran has this adoptive father, and he's like a grizzly bear shifter, and his name is M-A-H-O-N, and I've been pronouncing it Mahone, and I think it's pronounced in audiobook Mahon, and I'm just like, I can't change the way I pronounce things now. So I definitely needed the refresher on the Kate Daniels world. I am really glad that I read it because some characters pop up in Blood Heir that I was just like, oh, yes, I love seeing them again. And it's like, it's nice to see, since there's an 8-year time jump between Magic Triumphs and Blood Heir, it's nice to see exactly where you left off certain characters. And I was reminded of a couple deaths and a couple of like points that are spoilers, and I can't really say anything that are important in Blood Heir. So I loved it. Still a 5-star, so... and 5-star audio. I really like the audiobook. Next, I read an arc of The X Talk by Rachel L. Solomon, and this isn't her debut novel because she's written in YA, but this is her first rom-com. And I really did like these 2 characters. So Shay Goldstein has been in public radio business for like 10 years. She got an internship and she's worked her way up, and she really likes her job. And this was kind of something that she shared with her father, who her father passed away. So it's like really important. And she always thinks that she has like a grating voice. Like I can relate. I don't really love hearing my own voice on camera. I've gotten very used to it though, since I have to edit podcasts and edit this. So I'm just like, it's my voice. It's whatever. I know it's not for everyone, but she's thinking that the reason why she's not actually on radio, she's a producer, because she doesn't have a voice for radio, but her father had a voice for radio. And there's this young guy who just recently started working at the station, and it's like an NPR like outpost. I'm not sure how all that works. The author actually used to work in radio and all that, so she understands all that, but that wasn't important to me. The characters were important to me. Dominic Yun has a master's. He always talks about how he has a master's, and he just grates on Shay so much because he's just like this new guy and he's getting so much attention from their boss, and it really like just aggravates her. How fast he's climbing the ladder where she's worked really hard to get where she is, and they just have this enemies relationship. Well, ratings are going down for all of their shows. And so their boss is like, we need new ideas. Shay comes up with the idea to do the X Talk, where they get two exes to host the show, and the problem is they need somebody in-house to be able to host it. They would take like interviews from marriage counselors, like all kinds of people, and like answer questions from callers and stuff, and basically it would be like, hey, we're exes and we work at this radio station together and this is how we stayed friends, and let's analyze and see where we went wrong and like whatever. So Dominic is more into breaking news. He wants radio to be more focused on like breaking news. He had a breakthrough story about the mayor that like kind of went viral, and so he's like kind of not semi-famous, but you know, I mean, like they definitely like loved all that news that he had about the mayor, and so it makes Shay like not like him even more. They get tapped to be the host because the radio station's not doing that well. And I know it's probably not even a radio station. I'm probably saying that wrong, but whatever. If you want to correct me in the comments, you can totally do that. But it's not doing that well. They're going to have to let people go. And though Dominic does not want to lie because he's like pretty into like doing some facts, Shay doesn't want to lose her job, so they agree to host this. She actually has to convince him. During their first talk show, like they have to lie and say that they were dating. And they even come up with like a plan, like when did we start dating? So during the course of this kind of fake dating, they really get to know each other. Their boss actually sends them on the weekend because he's like, there was this caller that was sleuthing and been like, I don't think y'all really dated. And so the boss got like really nervous, and he sent them on a weekend to like really get to know each other. Like you need to, if you get put on the spot again, you need to know these answers. So that's the weekend where both Shay and Dominic both open up about to each other, and Shay even like points out like, dude, you kind of sound very superior. You're always bringing up your master's degree, and they even decide to bring it up in the show, and it becomes like a funny thing where every time that Dominic would bring up his master's degree, they had to put like money in a jar, or $5 in the jar, and then they would like donate it or whatever. So it was like such a cute romance. I really, really enjoyed it. Now there was this conflict at the end, and I was pretty mad at Dominic. I was like, you done fucked up, dude. I'm like, you need to grovel. And normally I don't like the way that some of these grand gesture scenes go, but I was pretty into it. It fit with the narrative, so I was fine with it. So anyway, I really enjoyed this book. I think that it's very sweet and pretty steamy, and yeah, it was just a good story. I gave this book 5 stars, and then I read my next arc for January, and both of these books come out on the 26th. My next one is The Heiress Skits Duke by Harper St. George. I have a whole vlog on it. I'll link that down below, but I really loved this book so much. I'm just kind of delving into the Gilded Age historical romance novels, and I love what Harper St. George did with the heroine August Crenshaw, who is an American heiress. She comes from money. Her father has Crenshaw Ironworks, and he has been laying down railroads all over America, so he has like tons of money. But they're nouveau riche. They don't have ties to like that blue blood that everyone loves to talk about in London, and he wants those connections, and he sees other people, other families, rich American families marrying into these old aristocratic families, and he wants those connections for his business. He has 2 eligible daughters, but August is very integral in his business. She actually attends meetings with him and voices her input to investors, and her father lets her do what she wants to do basically because he knows that she's good at business and good at numbers. So August goes with her friend and attends this bare knuckle boxing match, like underground fighting, and she sees one of the boxers, and they have like this moment where they meet eyes. She's like, ooh, he's pretty hot. And she even like trips at one point. The really hot guy has knocked out his opponent and he's laying on the ground. And so she accidentally like trips over her skirts, falls, and she's falling towards the ring, and he like catches her, and they kind of have a moment, and he knows who she is. He knows that she's a Crenshaw, and says, and she's trying to warn him like, hey, your opponent's getting up. And he's like, well, give me a kiss for good luck before. And so they kiss. And since that this book is called The Heiress Skits Duke, we know that this is the love interest, and so this is the Duke. He is in need of funds. He does boxing to get some extra money, but it's really not helping. He has got to marry an heiress because all of his creditors are going to call in the debts, and he is just going to have zero money to be able to take care of all of his estates. All of his tenant farmers will suffer. They're already suffering. His estates are falling apart, and he has 2 younger sisters who need to make their debut pretty soon. He's kind of been putting off marriage, but now that he's met August, and his mother even suggested, hey, there's a Crenshaw girl, and I've heard that she's like, would be a great wife. And so Evan, Duke of Rothschild, is like, yeah, I met her. Well, didn't tell. He's not telling his mom this, but he's thinking, yeah, I met her, and we had a connection, and she's feisty, and I like her. So I wouldn't mind marrying her. I wouldn't mind being married to her. He goes to this dinner party, and he meets Violet Crenshaw, which is August's younger sister. And this is the Crenshaw daughter that they were actually recommending because Violet seems more biddable. August has a reputation for being like a blue stocking, and she likes to work, and the aristocracy does not like that. And so August is not as great of a catch as Violet is. But the problem is Violet is in love with somebody back in New York, and August is very protective of her sister. And so she like approaches Evan like, you're not gonna get my sister. Like, just because you need money does not give you the right to just force my sister to marry you against her will. And then as August slowly realizes that it's her that he's interested in, it's just very interesting. It's a very interesting story. I loved August as a heroine. I don't know if this book is going to get an epilogue, but in my reading blog, I do mention that I would have liked to see something specific in an epilogue, the way that it ended. But I really did enjoy this book. 4.5 stars, again, rounding up to 5 stars. Man, this is a good reading week. I don't think I rated anything low. Oh, 1. Well, it's fine. Next, I read Bound to a Warrior by Donna Fletcher, and this is the first book in her Warrior King series. I really enjoyed this historical romance. This is a medieval Scottish romance, and the hero and the heroine, Mercy and Duncan, are actually chained together for the majority of the book. They're in survival mode. They're running away from the current Scottish king's soldiers who are looking for them. They have this scene in the beginning, and it is the very first chapter, where they have a decision to face the soldiers at sword point, being run through with the sword and then thrown off a cliff, or they can jump off the cliff into the water below, hoping that they survive. And Mercy and Duncan have a silent communication. They decide to jump. Duncan then realizes that she can't even swim, and she was willing to risk that, willing to risk drowning, hoping that Duncan could be able to help her. And so that like trust and like the balls that she has like really intrigues Duncan. And so of course they have a romance. They're chained together. They can't they're running from danger. And so it's just like everything about this story is meant to bring these two people together and for them to be forced to get to know each other. I really enjoyed the journey, even though some scenes I felt were a little bit repetitive. But the thing about this series is there's a prophecy that the rightful king, the true heir, will make himself known, and there's like some stipulation for the prophecy. And Duncan and his other brothers, who are not blood related to him, all of those men kind of fit the prophecy, and we don't know which one is going to be king. So you have to read the whole series to find out. I definitely want to find out, so I'm definitely going to read the series. I gave this book a 4 star. Then I read Gentle Rogue by Joanna Lindsey. This was my first Joanna Lindsey. It's the most popular book on Goodreads, I believe, the highest rated book on Goodreads by Joanna Lindsey. And so I did have some high expectations for it, since it had such a high rating. And this was the book that was chosen to be recovered in this more updated cover and in the new trade size, mass market size. I always say trade. Mass market size. I really like this size, like definitely. The heroine, Georgina, goes to London to go find her wayward fiance. She's been waiting in America for 6 years for the War of 1812 to be over, waiting for her fiance to return. And he never did. And she knows that he's alive because her family is in shipping. They own a lot of ships and they're very wealthy. She even has like a ship for herself. So they know that though his ship was wrecked no lives were lost. She decides to go to London, and she does take one of like her trusty servants, Mac, who's Scottish, with her, so she's not actually alone, to go meet him. Finds out he's pretty much moved on with his life, and she's like pissed about it, but she has to return home. They don't have funds. I guess she just didn't bring money with her. Didn't think that she would need money. I listened to this book on audio, and I was very uninterested in the first part of this because I was just like, this is boring. Georgina really aggravated me. She seems quite childish, and I just did not enjoy her as a character, and she never really grew on me. The only time I enjoyed her character was when she was on the ship that is captained by James Mallory. And James Mallory is a former pirate, but he's a member of the aristocracy as well. I think his older brother, which was probably a previous book in the series, is like a marquess. I don't know. And I think James might be a viscount. But she has disguised herself as a boy to work her way, earn her keep for safe passage. And James Mallory immediately recognizes her because they did run into each other at like a bar in London, and he knows, but she thinks she's being very clever by disguising herself. And he lets her pretend that she's a boy, and he goes along with the ruse that like, yeah, you're a boy and you're my attendant. You're gonna have to sleep in my room. You're gonna have to like bathe me, scrub my back and stuff. So that was my favorite part of the book, is when he is knowingly making her uncomfortable, seeing how far he can push her before she's like, I'm a girl. That was the more interesting part of the book, and the rest I just didn't love. I didn't love once they got off the ship. I didn't love the drama with her family and her brothers, and it was just nothing much happened besides the romance. And it's such a weird thing to say, but honestly, there was no plot besides this romance, and I just think that since I didn't like Georgina as a character, that was a point against this book, because normally I don't care. The book doesn't have to have like a crazy plot for me to be interested, but they have to have interesting characters. And since I didn't find Georgina interesting, I didn't like the book. So I give this book 3 stars. I'm hoping that Love Only Once, which is the next book for the Historical Hellions, the book for February, I'm hoping that maybe I'll like that one better. If not, I have like 10 or 15 other Joanna Lindsay's to try, and hopefully I'll like one of them one day. Then I read Blood Heir, which I'm not going to talk about in this wrap up. I'm just letting you guys know that I did read this. I gave it 5 stars, but I have a vlog that's coming out on Monday where I talk all about Blood Heir. I'm going to talk about non-spoilery things for people who have not read it yet, and I will go into great detail into the spoilery things as well. So you'll get that on Monday. Just letting you guys know, I really love this one. I loved Aurelia Ryder, which is Julie's character. I love the whole premise of this book, and I love being back in the Kate Daniels world. Yes. Alona Andrews, I just love her. I love her so much. I also read A Notorious Vow, which I'm not going to review in this weekly wrap-up. I'm just letting you guys know again. But A Notorious Vow by Joanna Shupe is part of my historical romance readathon. It started on Friday, so I'm currently in the middle of reading a lot of books from it. But again, I'm vlogging all of this, so I'm going to talk about A Notorious Vow. I really did like this one. I enjoyed it. I'm going to give it a 4 stars, and I'll talk more about it in my vlog. But I have one more book that I can talk about, and that's Breaking Perfect by Lydia Michaels. Lydia Michaels. And I also added my character names so that I can quickly reference them in case I forget. Now, I just read Breaking Perfect last night. It is so good. I loved it. This is a menage romance, and it's MMF, which means all parties in this equation, the male, and the female, all do it. So like the difference between MFM is if the F is in the middle, then the swords don't cross. But if you have MMF, then the swords cross. And so in the female. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. The 2 heroes are bisexual in this romance. Again, this book was recommended by Jen from the Book Refuge. She has had so much influence on my current TBR because she has just like tapped in to a lot of what I love, and so she has like tons of books that she's like, you're gonna love this one, like go read it. This is why I'm like in the middle of reading Cora Riley. And so Breaking Perfect was one of the menage romances that Jen was just like, I think you'll really love it, knowing that I love MMF romances. The heroine Libby, her name is Liberty, has OCD, and the way that Lydia Michaels writes Libby dealing with OCD and the way that it affects her everyday life, the way that it affects her marriage to Mason. I just loved it. So Libby and Mason have been married for about 5 years, and she likes routine, and that also includes their bedroom life. But lately she's been feeling like she wants more from Mason, because Mason's pretty gentle, but she doesn't always get off every single time, and so she's been like handling things herself for a while. Mason starts cluing in that maybe Libby can start handling some more because she's had some past trauma, and there's trigger warnings for Libby has had to deal with some things in her past. She was assaulted and molested as a child, and so she's dealing with that. And also self-harm, trigger warning for self-harm, because some of the things that Libby uses to cope are harmful when she feels overwhelmed. And I think Lydia Michaels does such a phenomenal job about this. And the way that Mason totally loves her and like has developed this routine for her in order for her to lead a normal life as possible. But the goal is for her to not fixate on certain things. And he notices when he takes a little bit more of a commanding hand in the bedroom because he is a dom. There's some elements of BDSM in this book, and Mason is a dominant and Libby is very submissive, and it very much works in their relationship. It's a chance for Libby to let go and to stop thinking. And so Mason has been very careful, not like influencing her anyway, because he wants to make sure that she has autonomy because she didn't grow up that way. But now Mason is like, oh, so we can explore this more. I can kind of exert my dominance a little bit more in the bedroom. Like, let's see how this works. And I love the communication because he's like, listen, you're in control. If we do anything, there is a bedroom in our house that's exclusively for you. If you go in that room, I will not cross the threshold. You are safe in that room. I love the communication. I love Mason and the way that he handles this. But then Mason's old flame, Sean, appears. Mason has not told Libby that he's bisexual, and he had a very deep, long relationship with this man named Sean in college. Something happened. Sean wasn't ready to commit to Mason, and like Mason was very much in love with Sean, would have married Sean hands down. And this is like 13 years later, and he shows up at the doorstep and he meets Libby first. And at first he's just like, I'm not gonna want to like her or whatever. And then he sees her. Sean is also a dom, and so he has very protective feelings towards Libby. And Sean brings something to this relationship that it's not like Mason and Libby weren't in a very great relationship. They were finding their own way, but like Sean being in the mix just like completes it. They weren't broken without Sean, but they're so much better with Sean. And I think that's why I love this romance so much. It was so good. 5, 6 stars, like 5+ stars. I love this book. If you're into Menage, read this book. It's amazing. I love it. So that concludes the weekly wrap up for the second week of January. And I really loved all the books that I read for this week. I had a really good reading week. Hopefully the Historical Romance Readathon has some awesome books that will make next week's wrap up really amazing as well. And of course, some more Cora Riley's. It's just, that's the way it's going this month. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you subscribe to get notified of any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.